Today's Women in Horror subject is Lisa Wilcox, who played Alice Johnson in the film Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master, and A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. Now, there is no argument that the Elm Street franchise really started to decompose at the time of Part 4, and by the time we got to Part 5 a year later, the stench had set in and the death knell was sounding for the entire series. Still, although they both had glaring faults, I think the crown for the worst film in the franchise goes to whatever the hell Freddy's Dead was supposed to be. Seriously, that film was the most shark-jumping, poorly acted, disappointingly scripted and crappy excuse for 3D I've ever seen. It's a truly unforgivable effort considering Rachel Talalay, the director, had worked on every Elm Street film prior. Whilst I could make a case for Part 2, Freddy's Revenge being the first sign of franchise hemorrhaging, as it's really a step back from the amazing original film, at least the film retains some scary aspects. Take for example the opening bus scene, and also the scenes where a dazed Jesse wanders his house and sees Freddy lurking in the corners. Or when a noise upstairs thump, thump, thump is investigated and he finds his sister ethereally skipping and chanting in her bedroom. However, after the return to form of Part 3, which Craven was partly involved in, and Wisey went back to the Elm Street children, now locked in a psychiatric ward with a group psychosis, I think Elm Street flew over the cuckoo's nest. Part 4, directed by Rennie Harlin, threw everything out the window. To be fair, I quite like the Alice in Wonderland style theme of Part 4, as it threw away being scared and replaced everything with a bright colour palette and equipping Freddy, who spoke almost entirely in one-liners. Part 5 suffers worse, however, as it tried to go back to the dark roots of the original, but goes truly graphically and borderline torture porn, and just horribly wrong. In Part 4, after the awesome Patricia Arquette regenerates into a less than stellar Tuesday Night, and the last of the Elm Street children are killed, Alice becomes the conduit of bringing new victims to Freddy. Apparently, with the Elm Street children all dead, Freddy needs to be given new victims by a woman who has Kristen's ability to pull them into her dreams. Alice follows the trope of all great slasher final girls. She's a wallflower, virgin, clearly charming and worthy of rooting for, but she dresses like Carrie, survives an alcoholic father, gets pushed behind the better looking and more promiscuous girls, and has a nasty habit of daydreaming into fantasy. These brief periods of episodic dissociation will be returned to in Part 5 as her unborn son is possessed by Freddy, but we'll get to that later. Alice watches her friends die, but as she begins to chip away at their scepticism and even land the attention of hot boy hunk Dan, who is so pretty that even I wouldn't mind dating him, she finally stands up to Kruger in an almighty low-budget fight where she eventually triumphs with a mirror. Alice's transformation is detailed in one scene as, during a dose of sleeping tablets, she dresses in ripped skinny jeans, puts on some items that give her strength that her friends have left, before engaging in some karate-light Freddy bashing. This in the place where Freddy himself calls Wonderland, Alice. Wilcox's transformation is brilliant, and in my opinion, she nails the final girl with aplomb. Here, the meekest of the meek, only ever able to stand up for herself in a daydream, learns to kill the man who has killed her friends, and ends up landing the hottest hunk in school. What's interesting is that Alice is only ever confident in her daydreams, so it makes sense that the world of sleep is her domain and she truly is the master of dreams. She's the literal daydreamer, and only in her head will her hellish life ever get better. Her brother Rick deals with their father's drunken grief by karate, but Alice has none of this. Her wallflower invisibility is apparent to everyone but us. We are in on the cliche though, and as the viewer knows exactly what to expect from a slasher, we have the Nostradamus foresight that Alice will blossom and stand up for those she has lost. To be fair, Elm Street 4 deals with a final girl who isn't just in danger, but who is actually guilty of letting her friends die. Rick, Debbie and Sheila are all given to Freddy in the dream, so, whilst dealing with her self-hatred and introversion, she is now burdened with the curse of every time she falls asleep, someone will die. It's a thread I quite like in Elm Street 4, as the final girl actually goes looking for Freddy, not to save her own life, but to stop being the cause of other people's deaths. She's an avenger more than a survivor, and Wilcox handles all scenarios well, whether watching her brother being eaten as a meatball, seeing gorgeous Dan in danger, or screaming in class because she knows she's killed her brother. She also kicks Freddy's ass like no other has done before. In Elm Street 4 we follow up on the souls of my children from Part 3. This explains that Freddy traps the souls of his victims inside his chest, and this is a purgatory that they live in forever. Therefore, when Alice sets them free by avenging not just her friends but releasing all of the lost souls, the Dream Master ends him once and for all. I'm kidding, there was still money in the franchise, so we get to the WTF Dream Child a year later. However, Alice Johnson is the only Freddy girl who survived 2 films. Even Nancy died in Part 3, and I'm not counting the meta New Nightmare as canon as it's set outside the storyverse of the first 6. She also ruins Freddy. Seriously, in 5 and 6, he is weak. Alice ripped his life force from him, and when he regenerates in part 5, he's like an old man, shorn of his arrogance and power. Yes, he abuses and kills and takes pleasure in it. See the Need for Speed or Bon Appetit bitch scenes. But Stephen Hopkins even said that he was supposed to be weak of following hundreds of souls ripping out of his chest, and he's now a parasite, subsisting through an unborn fetus and slowly regenerating his strength. Elm Street 5 is a vastly inferior film, but it gives a much greater performance from Wilcox. She is the warrior now. There's no journey to Final Girl, as she is the Final Girl already. Her daydreams now come back, but this time she's experiencing her baby's dreams, so when she zones out for sometimes hours at a time, she's trapped in her baby's dreams, and her casual fantasies become a truly dissociative nightmare. It's nice to have Dan back too, although he is killed very slowly and painfully on a motorbike early on in the film. A dig about drunk driving is made later when his body's recovered. And so Alice's dad gets some redemption here as well, as he now attends AA meetings, gives a toss about the girl he used to verbally abuse, and steps up as the natural protector that he should be. There are many pro-life and pro-choice allegories in part 5. As the subject of unplanned pregnancy and rape are thrown at the screen. Living in England, our abortion laws and views are vastly different to the fury it can attract in parts of the USA, so I never thought too much about it until later in life. However, Alice is dealing with an unplanned pregnancy which she can't give up, as it's her last part of Dan. Even when her friends suggest a termination, that's not going to happen. And after living through a literal nightmare of being raped by 100 maniacs, as per Freddy's origin story, she watches his rebirth and then has the haunting nightmare that he is actually inside her. Freddy recreates the horrifying ordeal of his mother in Alice's dream, but then, although we are thankfully spared the ordeal of watching a prolonged sexual assault, the idea that Freddy has been thrust inside her and is now living inside her child is as good as allegory for rape as it can be. Also, despite the fact that the baby is the only thing keeping Freddy alive, and more than likely he will be born disfigured if she brings him to term, Alice continues her pro-choice mantra that he is part of her and won't be given up. Wilcox ends the film beating Freddy by shoving his deformed infant self back inside his mother. Yeah, it's weird. That's where he's trapped until Freddy's dead, and that's also quite forgotten in Freddy's Dead, but never mind. Alice has a healthy baby and gets the life with her dad and her one remaining friend that she wants. She has her baby, she's quite content, and at the very end of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, we watch her with her family, being watched by a skipping child who hums the 1-2 Freddy's Coming For You theme. It's an unsettling image, the idea that she will always belong to him and he will always be with her throughout her life. Wilcox is brilliant, and once Elm Street was forced in a different direction after Part 3, she's a worthy successor to Freddy's nemesis Nancy. One could argue that Kristen falls too easily after her journey in Part 3, but there's a good reason for that. This is Alice's film now. This is Alice's journey. She's Freddy's battered dream wife, who has no choice but to do what he says as he isolates and breaks her before she discovers her extroversion and strength and avenges all the little boys and girls he has destroyed over the years. It's a shame we didn't get more Wilcox and her story wasn't followed up. Yes, I'm aware some comics and stories have her in, but I'm talking about film canon here. It's also a shame that her life after this remains a mystery. Part 6 would have made more sense with Jacob, Alice's son, all grown up and being used as Freddy's conduit, but that's for a different video. Anyway, spot 2 in the Hall of Fame go to the Avenger, the Dream Master, and the girl who fought madness, an alcoholic dad, and the grief of Dan's parents who were arguing that she was an unfit mother and wanted to adopt her baby. Lisa Wilcox's Alice is brilliant, and she remains a template when I do my own writing for strong female characters. Anyway, next time it's Naomi Harris and 28 Days Later, so until then, I'll catch you later.